Jackie Brassey is head of the workforces at the McKinsey Health Institute. Michael Platt is director of the Wharton Neuroscience Initiative at the University of Pennsylvania. And Pedro Conceic is director of the Human Development Report at UNDP. You are three of the people I admire most in this space, honestly, and we've talked a lot before on these matters. So what is a brain-ready workplace for you? How would you characterize it? Jackie?
Thank you. Thank you, Paweł, and thank you for having me. It's a real joy to be here, and our conversations have been very inspiring because I knew this question was coming, and ever since you asked me this question, I've been pondering on it. As a practitioner academic, it's not an easy one to answer, but I'll give it a try. I spend a lot of time in the workplace talking to CEOs and senior HR leaders and health officers. And if you think of, in a simplified way, the brain is there to keep us safe and preserve energy, and therefore it likes predictability, then the workplace currently is a very difficult place to be because there is a lot of transformation, there's a lot of unpredictability. And so in order to create a brain-ready workplace, you need to create the systems that actually not try to control the dynamism and the transformation that's happening, but to create the predictability that you can rely on you are able to cope with it. And that, for me, in all the research that we've done, it's very clear, has to do with brain skills, so individual skills. It has to do with team skills and team settings, like psychological safety and inclusion. And it also has to do with the organizational systems that need to be in place to help people deal with the dynamism, especially if you look at in one of the books that I've co-authored is called Deliberate Calm. We talk about this adaptability paradox that organizations and leaders face, which means if you are in high-stakes, unfamiliar territory, it's the hardest actually to be adaptable. And for that, you need those skills, but you also need the team setting and the organizational systems. And I'm sure we are going to deep dive a little bit more into it.
We will, very much so. So, Michael.
All right. Well, thanks for having me here again. It's a real pleasure, and congratulations to everyone here and the organizers. It's a fantastic event, and I'll build on Jackie. I think that's a great start, a great definition. I think that we can broaden it out. We've talked about these issues today already. I mean, a brain-ready workplace is one that, at minimum, is not a negative, is not a negative for brain health, because let's face it, an unhealthy brain is not a productive brain or a creative brain or a brain that works well with others. So hopefully it'll even be a brain health positive workplace. It's a workplace that is in which an individual's skills and talents and motivations are aligned with the actual jobs that they do, and that the appropriate training is in place to help them close the gap between where they are and elite performers. So I think that that's an important component. And then increasingly, I think it's going to be one that values what AI can't do. So I know we're going to come back to this, but that elevates those things that are uniquely human. So our social and emotional intelligence, our creativity, and that's going to depend critically on resilience. So I'm putting out a lot of buzzwords that I think that we'll talk about. Let's start there.
Brilliant. Let's decode those in a second. Pedro, when you hear a brain-ready workplace, what would you think about first?
Well, it's great to be here again, and we had wonderful conversations leading up to this panel. So, brain-ready workplace depends on the perspective that you take on addressing this question. So I come from a particular angle, the human development perspective. So I'll just say a few words about what that means. So we can contrast human development with human capital. Human capital is something important because it's a way of understanding if humans are good factors of production, right? Productive in the economy. And I guess brain capital has the same intuition. It's an asset that can be useful in the economy. But human development goes beyond that. It's important for humans to be productive in the economy, to earn income based on their work, but being in a workplace gives people much more, right? Much more than a living, than income. It gives them meaning, it gives them dignity, it gives them connection with others. So from a human development perspective, a brain-ready workplace has to account for all of these dimensions and look not only at the capital aspect of the brain. And I want to pick up on something that Michael said on AI, because we have a human development report every year where we produce the Human Development Index that ranks countries according to this notion of how well different nations are doing when it comes to human development. And we have a topic every year. And the topic this year was artificial intelligence and human development. And I think from that perspective, a workplace ready has to account for the fact that we have to coexist in the workplace with brain-like machines, or machines that have capabilities that are brain-like. And the key, and we can elaborate more on this, is very much along the lines of what Michael suggested, what we argued in the report, was that it's important to not look at these machines as something that replaces humans. They can automate potentially some tasks that humans do, but not wholesale replacing humans, but very much finding ways in which workplace enables these machines to augment what people can do.
Brilliant. So you referred to human capital, Pedro, and the impact of AI. And I want to pose a question which, I don't know, you may have thought about already or not, namely human capital versus brain capital. Human capital emerged a good few years ago in a somewhat different technological context. Now, our community uses the term brain capital, and I think it's not coincidental that this is exactly at this phase of exponential growth of artificial intelligence, where we try to look for human squared capital, so to say. And I guess we define it as brain capital for different reasons, because we look at the cognitive, we look at the emotional, and the social characteristics, the creativity. So that for us, I mean, is that, you think, a fair proposition to argue that we need to move from human capital, which was valid in this earlier phase, before the current technological acceleration, and brain capital, which needs to accompany our journey through what we see now? I mean, it's a question to all of you.
I was thinking about it before I came up here, and I think thinking about human capital. Human capital to me is viewing humans as just like the machines on an assembly line. So it's sort of a muscle-based economy, and brain capital is really about, recognizes the importance of knowledge and the ways in which we apply it and everything that goes into that. I think we may be going past even brain capital, if you will. So if AI and maybe AGI hits at some point, then the sort of value of human intelligence might diminish. So the other parts of our brain capital, relationship capital, creativity capital, might come to be much more important at that time.
Super interesting. So if you have
just a quick reflection on a point that Michael made on the value of human intelligence diminishing. Maybe it may happen, but I think it's important for us to recognize that if it happens, it's because we choose to let it happen, right? There's nothing inherently in the technology, in the organization of economic activity, in the decisions of firms that makes that inevitable. So if that happens, it's a choice.
So since we already got into a discussion about AI, I mean, I look a lot into this relationship between AI and productivity, and we don't have yet enough research in this area, but there is some coming out, right? And in different places. And what we see is very clearly that complementarity of the human and the machine is producing better impact on productivity as opposed to pure automation. Now, that's productivity, but when you then want to analyze what the workplace needs, how does that, in your view, translate into the different interventions which one could plan, right? So how do you design complementarity in this ever faster moving environment? Jackie?
Yes, well, and we can't catch up fast enough. So I would love to ground us a little bit back before I answer that question in research that we did in 30 countries, where we looked at 30,000 employees, and we asked them questions about holistic health. And I heard the term holistic a couple of times today, and also burnout symptoms. And so we asked them all these questions, all validated scores. So if there is anyone interested in research, let me know as well, because what we do is we work in an academic way, and we want to make sure that we psychometrically validate our questionnaires. And I know this is an old traditional way of doing research. We will move into other areas too. But we asked in 30 countries, what is the status of holistic health and what is the status of your burnout symptoms? And then we put a lot of other questions behind that to predict these outcomes. And the model, and those were questions about demands and enablers in the workplace, which means stressors, in another word, or energizers. It's all coming from the job demands resources theory. And what we saw was actually that what drove holistic health, which is physical, spiritual, social, and mental health in terms of functioning, sort of thriving, so to say, was primarily all those enablers like inclusion, psychological safety, job alignment that you spoke about. But the number 1 and 2 drivers of those were adaptability and resiliency. And those are skills. And so those skills are not only critical for health and well-being and for sustainability and for all the generations through the pipeline, but they are also critical to actually deal with those new transforming workplaces, because it's honestly so turbulent now, and so there's so much transformation. And the amount of time that I talk to these leaders that really challenge, that really are struggling with this, and the traditional way is to go back to control and think, this will pass, and then we will go back to normal. But we won't. And so if we do not build those skills like resilience and adaptability, and we heard Simon talk about we need to actually build the construct, but let me use this proxy, adaptability and resilience, that we measured, then actually we will not be able to deal with all the change. It's also related to innovative behavior and also related to engagement. So a couple of more facts. In that same research, over 30 countries, we actually found that only half of those 30,000 people scored high on resilience. They self-rated. And resilience was defined as I can handle unforeseen situations. It's a classical construct with a number of questions. How do you deal with unpredictability? Adaptability is about having also fun with it and thriving in it. Only 28% scored high on that. Combined on those two, less than 1 out of 4, 23. Now, we need it massively, but we have a very low number. I don't know what the maximum number can be, but this is what we found. If people score high on it, they also score high on innovative behavior and engagement. But here comes another data point. If you combine that with individual skills and psychological safety and organization that has the right systems to support this, the increase was over 6 times higher versus the ones that score lower. So actually, it shows that if you build this, it's association. We didn't do a predictive model is not a causation, but there is a high correlation, and actually more research is needed, but it is promising, right? So to answer your question, it's highly needed in this massive transformational stage. And one other term that I already hear is the AI anxiety. So people reach out, what do you know? What is the level of AI anxiety in the workplace? Well, we'll come with an answer. We're working on that, but it's real.
Thank you, Jackie. So maybe to stay a little bit in this adaptability/resilience territory, because they are definitely very spacious terms, right? Both adaptability and resilience. So what I'm thinking about is, how actionable these recommendations for companies are. I mean, you work with companies directly, so you'll be able to tell us what are the best practices in terms of actually increasing workers' adaptability and resilience. But I will also afterwards want to bring in Michael and Pedro to share from your perspective. Now, what type of guiding principles do we need to steer the workforce properly, right?
So yes, what type of interventions? There are a few very potent interventions that already exist, and it can be skilled. Actually, we've done this with a pharmaceutical organization where we have skilled training around adaptability, and it improved leadership behaviors by 3 times higher, not only self-rated but also 360-degree rated, and also improved health and well-being 7 times higher compared to control group even. But there is also a study where I personally rolled out a training on emotional flexibility that drove actually self-efficacy and resilience. That was in one of our own offices in Germany. So it can be trained, but it needs to be done with evidence-based interventions. And we have actually one thing that I would already want to plug in here. We have looked at 3,000 interventions in the workplace. We have an interventions database that we will publish an article about end of this year around, with a special zoom into brain skills as well, interventions that are no regret moves. But we need much more. But a lot of those that actually came to the surface currently that exist are around training individuals and training, having very good training programs and then integrating it in the workplace.
Super, thank you, Michael.
Yeah, so this is a great question. I'm going to hopefully complement what Jackie has said, and I'm going to focus not on the individual but on the group. And this proceeds from what I believe is the secret of our success as a species, which is that we are wired to connect. So we have essentially dedicated machinery in our heads for building connections with other people, right? And this machinery allows us to work together, to learn from each other, to cooperate and trust, and to overcome our own selfish tendencies. And we already heard, from Pedro that companies where people have stronger connections, they're more productive, they're more innovative, they're more resilient. And so when I get in front of CEOs, COOs, CHROs, and MBA students, I can say, here's the value proposition. And if you make these investments, your company will do better. It will lead to higher value. But of course, they don't necessarily want to put money in the game. And so the beauty of working on social relationships is that it's low to zero cost. So to create a culture and emphasize a culture of connection where you make time and space and value people making connections with each other, where you provide opportunities to work on, train, enhance social and emotional intelligence. And I mean from the top, from the leader, because it's often the leader the CEO, who's not manifesting those skills and tendencies. And then you see that ripple down through the entire organization. And we put that into practice. So we go into companies. Zab Johnson's here, my partner, not in crime, but fighting crime. So we go out and we do these kinds of workshops. And it's actually pretty simple. And then you can measure the outcomes. And we know what the fundamental bases are, from hardcore laboratory work. And we've shown that the same principles, for example, and I think we're going to talk about physiological synchrony, but these same principles that characterize strong relationships in the world with our friends and our family also appear to obtain and predict workplace relationships too. So that's exciting because it's showing, I think, a path forward.
Thank you, Michael. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work on the concept of synchrony and also how that is changing as the labor market is evolving?
So this idea of synchrony, I didn't invent it. It's a collaborative discovery over the last decade or so, but it's this observation first made in humans, but also demonstrated in lots of social animals, bats, mice, monkeys, you name it. that when we have a good relationship with somebody else, this actually goes back decades to the psychotherapeutic literature. When we have a good relationship with somebody, our brains essentially begin to resonate. So the pattern of activity in one person's brain becomes aligned with that in another person's brain, which means they're seeing the world a similar way, feeling similarly about it, and more likely to undertake action together. And it percolates down to our bodies, so our hearts beat together, or more closely together, breathe together, move together. So it's this kind of really robust phenomenon. And when people have higher either brain or physiological synchrony, we can parse that more if you want, that predicts higher degrees of trust, better communication, teamwork, and on and on and on. So it's like got all these good consequences. And we showed in a paper last year in a business setting that essentially committees of random people, students, et cetera, that you bring into the lab, who are given a really hard task they were judging applicants for a position, and they get this big long resume and lots of information, and it was kind of information overload. And some people had unique information and others did not. And it's only 50% of committees ever get this right, this task right. And those committees that had high physiological synchrony were the ones that reached consensus and made the right hire. So what was that characteristic, this synchrony? We think what that really represents is psychological safety in some sense. So it is the biological marker of psychological safety, which are the conditions that must be obtained for people to feel safe to say, hey, I know something you don't, and let's have a robust discussion of it rather than rush to judgment.
Right, super interesting. I will want to bring in questions, by the way, so please raise your hands if you already have a comment or a question. But Pedro, back to this idea of complementarity and the findings from Jackie's studies about adaptability and resilience. Do you think, and I do want to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here for the sake of our discussion, namely, do you think that adaptability and resilience will suffice in order to get us towards the complementarity that we need in order to have a thriving labor force in the age of AI?
Before I address that question, I was not planning on doing this, but the points that Michael raised on the importance of relationships, if you allow me, I'll just make a reference to the Human Development Report of next year, in which we're going to extend this notion of the importance of humans being in a good relationship with each other, with the idea and concept of being in a good relationship with nature, as a way of helping us to address also sustainability challenges. If you're interested, we put out some ideas in a paper we published in Nature in June of this year. It's called An Aspirational Approach to Planetary Future, so if you Google, you will find it. And last month, I also put out an op-ed in the Financial Times that also has some ideas. So sorry for this plug, but I couldn't resist raising it. So let me just add quickly two points to the great points that Jackie and Michael have already raised. So to make my first point, I want to ask all of us, who has used an AI tool like ChatGPT or Gemini recently? So almost everybody. So the first point I want to make is AI today is very different from the AI that has been deployed by firms, governments, the military, all sorts of organizations for decades. AI today is something that we all use in all sorts of aspects of our lives. Let me just give you a statistic. ChatGPT came online in November 2022. At that time, 95% of the traffic, web traffic that went through the website came from high-income countries. A few months later, the majority of traffic was coming from middle-income countries. So this is just an explosive diffusion of technology. So the use of AI today in the workplace, in schools, in hospitals, by students, by doctors, by patients, by workers, is something that all of us have a lot of agency in how we shape the use. So to go to your question, I think that the adaptability, the aspects that Jackie put on the table are very important to enable us to exercise that agency. The second point I want to make briefly is to report on the results of a survey that we conducted, a global survey that we conducted for our Human Development Report, not about predicting what will happen with AI, but asking people what do they expect AI to mean in their work. Do they expect AI to automate, to displace them, or do we expect AI to augment? So this is the dichotomy that you spoke about. So this is not a prediction, but it's what people expected. Two interesting findings from the survey. Global survey, all levels of income across a number of occupations. Respondents that expect automation to occur expect augmentation to occur to the same degree. In other words, those occupations and countries that expect little automation expect little augmentation. Those that expect a lot of automation also expect a lot of augmentation. So there's a correlation between the expectation of the two. And the second interesting finding is that there's a bias towards people expecting more augmentation than automation. So on balance, the expectation of people is that AI is going to augment what they are doing. So I think that workplace readiness in the future needs to account for this expectation, that people expect AI to augment what they're doing.
Thank you so much. I'm looking around. Yes, and we have a question. I will maybe I'll give you the mic so that everyone can hear properly.
Thank you. It's just a follow-up question on that data point. Was that an expectation or a hope?
Expectation. So the question is, do you expect AI to replace, automate things that we're currently doing, or do you expect AI to augment, enable you to do what you're already doing, in a better way, being more effective? So it was about expectation. So there was not a connotation on an emotional associated with hope or fear, right? So we tried to make it sort of neutral.
So I have a question. So excellent panel. A lot of the times when we hear discussions about workplace, it's always focused on the office. I spend a lot of time working with utility executives, energy executives around the world, and most of the people who keep the lights on are not in offices. So how do you account for them? How do you take them into your discussion when you're going to have at least maybe 50% of the world's population will be working outside of offices? So have you looked at their role and how you're going to help them, or how AI is going to impact their work? Thanks.
Absolutely. So many of the applications of AI that are coming online have to do with applications in agriculture, for instance, or in construction. So many activities that are happening outside. In fact, recently there was a study that suggested that people were living off the land in many lower income countries trust more AI tools than the traditional extension workers that often go to these places to train or diffuse new technologies. So there are a lot of applications of AI outside of the office as well.
George brought up an issue earlier about the reduction in the number of workers that's coming with the reduction in fertility rates and population change. Especially in Asia, it seems that there's a real conflict in terms of women getting in the workplace and then choosing not to have babies, where there seems to be a high gender, discrepancy between the work of the man and the woman in terms of childcare. What are your thoughts in terms of, it's probably coming to the Western world as well?
It's here already.
It is. So
it is. I mean, we're down to 1.6 in
the birth
in
rate
the
is
US.
down, yeah, for sure. But are there ways that employers can help encourage that birth rate, or encourage women to choose that balance between having children and stepping down from the workplace?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I mean, that's a lot. I did write a paper on this with Peter Sterling. When was it? 2 years ago, or I think. It's complex. Why the reasons why fertility may be declining rapidly across basically the entire world except sub-Saharan Africa. There are the issues you brought up in terms of education for women and more opportunity getting into the workplace, but there seem to be other things going on. I mean, Peter and I link that collectively to a sense of despair. There's many things creating despair. Despair is at an all-time high in young people. Usually it peaks at my age and, midlife or past midlife. And it's peaking in young people. So a young person who is despairing, either because they're worried about the climate, or they're worried about the economy, or they're lonely, and they're addicted to technology, frankly, for a variety of reasons, that's not a person who's really motivated to go out, find a mate, and have children. And then if you grow up in a family that has fewer children, and we're seeing more and more single child families over successive generations, and just culturally and in your mind, you can't imagine anything, like a family with 10 kids or 5 kids or whatever. So it's a lot of things going together. And just to answer your point, what can companies do? I don't think they can do anything. I mean, even government interventions, providing stimulus, providing more extensive childcare, time off, et cetera. You see a brief blip in terms of an increase in fertility, and then it seems to continue to decline. So hopefully, if we get everything right, this is where we're trying to put our optimist hats on. AI and technology come in to save us at just the right time, so that the aging of populations doesn't overwhelm the lack of young people to support them.
I know you want to finish, Paweł, but just a quick addition. I fully agree with Michael, but to address your specific question, Claudia Golden, an economist that won the Nobel Prize recently, spoke of what she called greedy jobs. So greedy jobs are jobs that perhaps characterize many of the jobs that all of us have, that are just very demanding of time and impose a particularly heavy burden on women. And she argues that one of the reasons why it's not the only reason, it's very complex, the decline in fertility rates, but a lot of it has to do with this expectation of the role of women associated with social norms, what they're expected to do in the realm of care, for instance, and the need to fulfill the demands of these greedy jobs. So this is creating a lot of tension. Recently, I was in the Republic of Korea, South Korea, that has one of the lowest fertility rates in the world, and that was very, very clear that particularly young women, the pressure to succeed, to go to the right school starting from a young age, sort of dampens the ideation of having a family and having children. So it's very complex. I don't think it's something that companies on their own can do something, but collectively they can be part of a possible response to addressing the challenges of these greedy jobs.
So in the final round, I want to ask you a very packed question, and apologies for that in advance, because you have said before that there is a lot going on in the workplace, and it has to do with technology, it has to do with cultural shifts, demography is related to that as well. There are the mental health issues, there are generational issues. Gen Z workers are different to Gen X workers. So who has agency in the workplace today? And if, as I suspect you may tell me, the agency is multi-layered, how do we design interventions to be synchronous, to use Michael's term from earlier intervention? Jackie, would you like to start?
Happy to. You read my mind. It's multi-layered, of course. If you had to if you had to give me a choice, I would say it starts with the leadership team. Because they make core decisions, but they role model, and it should not be underestimated how much the role modeling of a leadership team cascades and impacts the wider organization. Actually, it was part of my PhD thesis many years ago. But the alignment comes from, and I think there's a lot of potency, especially in large corporations and in most organizations that are professionally organized, through the HR systems, right? And that is not only skill building and learning and development, it's also the performance management. And how do you actually embed it in the cultural side of the organization, and how we behave, and what is reinforced and what is not appreciated. So I think that requires thinking through holistically, how do you build that change management throughout the whole organization, from the compelling message, from leadership, from skill building and systems integration. I hope that's compact enough. I can talk for hours about this thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's interesting to think back only a couple of years when we were going through the so-called Great Resignation, where suddenly it was, workers had the agency. They were either leaving their jobs or considering leaving their jobs. And what was the characteristic at that time? It was a very frothy market with a lot of capital, a lot of cash floating around. And then, of course, we've seen a sort of rebound in the other direction. So I guess when I'm thinking, I mean, I agree with you totally. It starts at the top. That's where cultural norms that start. But if, as an optimist, we're going through the eye of the needle that is necessary until there's an unbelievable value unlocked by AI and other technologies, and that is appropriately kind of distributed, let's just say, then that may give a lot more agency, to individuals.
I fully agree with Michael. I was going to make this point. And again, I bring us back to the point I made earlier. AI, generative AI, so this new configuration of AI is diffusing much more rapidly at the level of workers, employees, than at the level of managers and decision makers. So there's the possibility of enabling this bottom-up agency. I'll just give you a statistic of an organization that's not a business, but very important in all of our lives, schools. So in the United States, only 16% of school districts give guidance to schools on the use of AI, right? So the top-down, 16%. 60% of teachers are already using AI in their classes. So you see this sort of bottom-up. And students, I don't have the statistics, but looking at my children, probably 100% of students are using AI already, right? So there's this potential for AI to empower people and actually give them a lot of agency in ways that it was not possible before.
Super, thank you so much. In conclusion, I would say that our collective aspiration should be to increase the aggregate agency wherever it resides at a given point in time. And if there is one objective for the brain economy community, as far as I can see, it would be to do that, namely to see how we can have a greater say over developments in the workplace so that they are steered in the direction of human flourishing. So thank you so much, Jackie, Michael, and Pedro for this most inspiring discussion. Many thanks. Thank you.